The 911 Carrera GTS, and as some of you guys know, I wasn't all that excited about this car when Porsche first launched it, because on paper it is basically a very well optioned Carrera S model with the power kit, so nothing too special on paper. And after my GT3 test, I really wanted to spend more time in a 911 Turbo on the same roads where I drove the GT3, and I had in fact already booked a Turbo when I realized that this GTS might be a bit more special than I first thought it is.
This is Porsche's most powerful 991 with a manual transmission that you can buy today, and the last one with a naturally aspirated engine before the next generation of the Carrera gets turbocharged. So what makes a GTS? Well, you get the wider Carrera for body and track, black exterior accents and 20-inch Turbo S wheels, the PSE sports exhaust, PASM Porsche active suspension management and PTV Porsche torque vectoring, bi-xenon headlights with a Porsche dynamic light system PDLS, an interior full of Alcantara, Sport Plus seats, the sport design steering wheel, the Sport Chrono package and an extra 30 horsepower from the 3.8 liter Carrera S engine, all at standard. I have been asked to review a GTS like this one in its purest form, but simply getting a manual 911 test car these days isn't as easy as you might think. Large media and magazine group tests focus on performance and economy rather than driver involvement and feel. And to win all of these tests, Porsche's press car fleet is stuffed with PDK cars.
I never understood why the manual didn't get more popular in the 991. But I have a theory. I think it was down-talked so much by the big media that people got scared of it. And that's a real shame for me. And another theory for me is the fact that there are more and more people actually on YouTube especially that review cars on video who are just not good enough drivers to show people how enjoyable the experience of shifting gears yourself and having a manual transmission in a high-performance car can actually be. And yes, I know that's a bit offensive to say, but let's face it, if something looks like a pain in the ass to use, you don't buy it, right? It's a real tragedy for me, because this manual here in this Carrera GTS is just perfect. Seriously. Let's run down the way it feels again. I can't really say anything new in comparison to what I already said in the Carrera 4 review that I did in 2013 actually, where I first drove a car with this 7-speed manual. What I can tell you is the fact that after I did this video I got tons of emails from people who didn't even have the chance to test drive a car with the 7-speed manual, so they ordered it blindly and they all love it. And the reason really is that this transmission works so great. You can shift through the gears with one finger, it's really easy to shift. You can't misshift into the 7th gear. I think that's something that many people are afraid of. You can only shift into 7th gear from 5th and from 6th gear. So no worries about shifting into the 7th gear, and the 7th gear is mainly used as an economy gear actually. So I drive this car as if it had a 6-speed normally when I'm driving it spirited. The other thing is the clutch in this GTS here is a little bit nicer than what I had in the Carrera 4 in 2013 and also, for example, in the Cayman S that I reviewed the same year. So the travel of the pedal seems to be a little bit shorter, so the bite of the clutch is actually nicer for me. I can shift it even faster. I don't have to lift my heel from the floor, so I can shift without moving my foot from the floor, and that's something that I often have to criticize actually about many modern manual cars, that the travel of the clutch pedal is way too long for me personally, and I have pretty long legs, so I should not be struggling with them, but I don't like it. I feel like many modern cars with a manual are designed in a way that people who are not that skilled at using a clutch can drive off smoothly by having a longer clutch pedal that is more forgiving. But this car here is the best proof for me that you really don't need it. You can drive off without using any revs, with idle basically, and not stall the car. And when you're driving spirited, that's when this car becomes really satisfying to drive with this manual. You can just shift really fast thanks to the fact that the travel of the clutch pedal is so short. So this is a rear-wheel driven Carrera GTS Coupe, as puristic as it gets basically, with the standard 7-speed manual transmission. It has a few nice options on it, I have to say. It has ceramic brakes, which are really expensive and work extremely well in this car. It has PDCC, Porsche Dynamic Chassis Control. That's a bit of a controversial option, but I personally really like it. And it has these racing seats with a full carbon fiber back that you also get in the GT3. Not as standard, but I had them in the GT3. So sitting in this car, apart from the manual, feels very similar to the GT3 actually. You have this lovely Alcantara wheel. What's nicer about the GTS, I have to say, is the overall materials that are used in this car. You know, you have a nicer dashboard. In the GT3 everything is plastic and very puristic. I know some people like that, but in the long term I find this place a little bit more pleasant to sit in. So I know quite a few people on forums share my videos, and I'm thankful for their feedback and for them discussing what I'm saying in these videos. And for you guys out there, let's get really geeky here and talk about the differences between a Carrera S with 400 horsepower, the GTS and the GT3. So the first thing that I noticed driving the GTS is the sound. At low RPMs, this Carrera S engine with the power kit sounds better to me than the GT3 engine, and in fact the flap of the sports exhaust, the valve, opens earlier in the GTS than in the GT3. In this car it opens at about 2,800 RPM, in the GT3 it opens at 3,500 RPM. Now some of you might say, where is the difference, Guido? That's only a few RPMs, but you are using low revs in a 911 much more often than you think you would, especially in town, and I find the sound of this car more enjoyable for this reason, because I spend more time at low RPMs in this car and yeah, it sounds better to me at low RPMs. The difference between this car and a Carrera S, it's a bit difficult actually to describe. Porsche says that this car revs more freely at higher RPMs, and yeah, I think that's really hair picking here. It's very similar. What you can feel and what the numbers suggest is that the Carrera S with 400 horsepower, the GTS and the GT3 all make the same 440 Newton meters of torque, but at different RPMs. So actually the 400 horsepower Carrera S makes its torque the earliest. I think at 5,600 RPM. The GTS makes the 440 Newton meters at 5,750 RPM. And the GT3 actually makes the 440 Newton meters at 6,250 RPM. Again, we are talking about very small differences, judging by the rev number, but it is noticeable for me actually. I feel like this car makes its torque a little bit earlier in comparison to the GT3. Does it rev more freely? Well, let's find out. Barely street legal what I'm doing here, and that's the thing actually. These cars, on paper, 430 horsepower in the GTS, 400 in the Carrera S, that's not a big noticeable difference. What's a notable difference is driving a GT3 compared to a GTS, I think. The GT3 needs more revs and it has a wider rev range, of course, to make its power, but it actually does feel quite a bit faster at high RPMs. The GT3 for me feels like a genuine 490 to 500 horsepower car from the factory. I know it only makes 45 horsepower more on paper, but it feels actually quite a bit faster than the GTS to me. But do we really need this kind of performance? Of course, I personally enjoy driving manual cars more than automatic cars. I realized driving this car that with PDK cars I often simply end up speeding, because the sensation of the PDK for me is just how fast it shifts, and you want to go to the red line all the time, and especially in the GT3 when you get this hard bang into your back when you're shifting at 9,000 RPM. That's extremely enjoyable, dramatic, and yeah, makes the driving experience of a GT3 maybe more exciting than of a Carrera S. But when can you actually reach 9,000 RPM or higher RPMs on public roads? Not that often, unless you really want to use your driving license or your driver's license. And I think that's really the main difference for me between these cars. I could say the same about a Carrera S, of course, but this GTS is spec'd out in a way that I personally would prefer my 911 to be. And if you think about it, if this will be the last 911 with a naturally aspirated engine and a manual transmission, this combination, it could be a future classic. I'm personally not very attracted to the fact, or yeah, so far it's a rumor, but I'm pretty sure that Porsche will actually go for turbocharged engines in the next generation of the 991, and I'm not really that attracted to turbocharged engines in the Carrera S. I just don't believe that they will sound like a naturally aspirated engine. And responsiveness is also a thing of its own with modern turbocharged engines. Yes, they have become very good, but if this is the last naturally aspirated 911 with a manual transmission and this kind of performance, 430 horsepower, I'm pretty sure that it will be a future classic, and that alone justifies the fact that Porsche is building this car. So I think I've rambled enough here. I told you everything that I feel about this car. all the differences. And I think I can end with the verdict that I think that for me personally, this 991 GTS is the best 991 that I have driven. For me it is the most enjoyable. And yes, the main reason is this stick here.